Everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 463. I hope you're all well, and thank you to all the people that have written in from the show that we did on intuitive eating, diet culture, body positivity, and all the rabbit holes that we went down. Loads of tags on social media, loads of people sort of sharing their thoughts and stuff. And we've had a couple of pretty long emails in that have spurred part 2 today. We've also had a couple of suggestions of like other people that we can potentially get on the show. But for now, me and Tom. Oh, hi Tom.
Oh, hi Ben. How you doing?
Me and Tom wanted to kind of dive in and sort of expand on how we're feeling about this, how our thoughts are evolving. So I think me and Tom will kind of crack the whip on a couple of questions that we've got today. And then at the end of that, I think it would be good again to kind of get more of your insights as listeners on how you're feeling about the last 2 sort of shows and where your opinions sit. And then we can almost formulate some stuff that we want someone else to maybe really comment on, who's kind of really in that community, that is really strongly in the kind of intuitive eating camp. And what I think is potentially interesting is allowing those people or a person to really frame how they feel about it on a personal level, because ultimately people have created this anti-diet culture, body positivity, intuitive eating movement as a result of their own personal experiences. So for us to understand the extent of their personal experience allows us to deconstruct how we fit other people and ourselves into this conversation, because we've got their experience and opinion, we've got my experience, opinion, Tom's, etc. Then we've got the research body, and actually it's about breaking down all of that and finding how we fit into it so we can navigate our own opinions and actions out the back of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that would be good. I mean, there's that great quote from, I think it was John Stuart Mill. It's really long and I'm not going to be able to recite it, but it basically says, if you only know your side of the argument, you don't really understand the argument. And we can sit here and I can try my best to frame everything so we're not just setting up a straw man and we're not misrepresenting people's views. But if the listeners are only really aware of other people's views because of how we framed them, we've almost certainly got something wrong. So it would be really useful to get people on who are in that community to just to highlight places where we agree and then maybe dig deeper into places where we don't.
Yeah, it was a big flaw of mine when I was younger in the industry that I kind of had my own weight loss journey, and that weight loss journey was in paleo nutrition. It was what was being talked about at the time, and that made me really focus on everything kind of paleo. And as soon as I saw like an anti-paleo argument, I kind of just dismissed it, and it's like, well, it's worked for me and I've had a really powerful life-changing experience. And actually that's not really me exploring why potentially paleo works, the true mechanisms, or how I thought it worked at the time. And actually we're going to read a question in a minute from Jenny, and Jenny highlights the fact that she listens to other opposing podcasts to understand and challenge her own views. And I thought that was a really healthy and quite refreshing mindset to say, I don't always agree with these people, but I want to hear what they say, so it challenges my own thoughts, and I just think that's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll just get into that now. So Jenny says, "Hi Ben, I just wanted to drop you a line to say how much I enjoyed this podcast episode. In fact, I listened to it twice as I wanted to go over some of the points raised. The discussion points you brought up and dissected resonated with me a lot, as for the last few years I've found myself trying to make sense of both ends of the debate. In this world of influencers, social media, and anyone suddenly becoming an expert on anything fitness and nutrition related, it's hard to navigate. I've followed some of the mainstream diets, Slimming World, etc., and also saw a PT regularly for around 2 years while I logged calories and macros daily. Exercise with my PT was brilliant. It helped me build strength and understand movement. I found it was great to have a set routine for each workout, however logging calories on apps became a chore and monotonous. I'm not currently seeing the PT just due to time and money constraints. However, I'm still exercising regularly 3 to 4 times a week, currently training for a half marathon in October. On the other end of this, I've looked more into intuitive eating and rejecting diet culture. I've read some books on this and follow some intuitive accounts on Instagram and listen to a range of podcasts. I also follow some accounts where I don't always agree with their message, but I want to be challenged on my own thinking. One of the parts of intuitive eating that I struggle with, though, is that some practitioners state your weight or size that you are right now is what your body naturally wants to be, and once you accept this, you can reject diet culture and eat intuitively. However, what if someone isn't happy with the weight that they are and wants to lose weight or put weight on? I feel like they shouldn't have to accept it is what it is, and if they want to do something about it, they can. I think sometimes diet and fitness gets overcomplicated through endless cure-all diets, Slimming World, Weight Watchers, Keto, Atkins, 5-2, and I find myself agreeing with your team's message that unless you're training for something specific, so bodybuilding, muscle building, bikini competitions, professional athletes, etc., you should just keep it simple, calories in versus calories out with some exercise that feels good for you. It's a bit of a ramble, but in all, I just wanted to say a big thank you for breaking down all the messages we're bombarded with on a daily basis and putting into words what I've been trying to navigate in my own thoughts. Keep up the awesome work and happy Friday, Jenny.
Yeah, so thank you, Jenny, for writing into the show. If anyone does want to write into the show, email bencoomber@gmail.com with the subject line podcast. One of the key things that stuck out to me is this argument about kind of rejecting diet culture and looking at the weight argument. The weight that you are now is where your body wants to be, and I kind of feel, I'll be honest, I feel that that's absolutely ridiculous. And I feel that way because as an obese man, when I was younger, if I was to sit there and accept that the way that my body is right now is where it wants to be, that's me denying the fact that I ate my way to that body weight. I went to boarding school when I was younger. Food was a free-for-all. I ate chip sandwiches with every meal. I didn't understand food. I had a poor relationship with food. And if I just had this information around me where people were like, oh, don't worry, just like accept your weight, it's all absolutely fine, then when I would have grown up and probably grown even more. I wouldn't have just stayed at 16 stone. I probably would have got bigger and bigger. That would have impacted my health, my organs, my heart, my well-being, absolutely everything. And, we've discussed many times on this podcast that there is a certain amount of additional fat mass that will become unhealthy. Now, that level of extra fat mass is going to be subjective. It's a little bit hard to kind of really sit here and say, you don't want to weigh an extra, stone and a half, 2 stone. That's going to be grey. And I think we have to kind of apply a little bit of common sense to that. Obviously, looking at health markers would be very important to do that. But the health industry came about because we started to have a greater awareness over our bodies. We started to have greater access to information with health and fitness. We started to see that actually, if we ran a lot or lifted a lot or did a certain thing, our body changed in certain ways. It got fitter, it got stronger, it got more muscular. So people started to say, well, why don't we do more of that? Why don't we understand that? And that's how the advent of weight training to improve muscle mass, etc., came about. And I think kind of my point here is that everything can be done in a healthy way or an unhealthy way. I had an unhealthy relationship with food and exercise when I was younger. I now have a very healthy relationship, but I had to go through some unhealthiness to realize where the healthiness potentially was. So, most of the messages that I've had with people online that are struggling with this kind of intuitive eating, anti-diet culture have come from this fact that someone needs to just accept their weight. I totally agree that someone needs to accept themselves as a person and love themselves as a person, respect their body. But when we look at the physical body, for me, there's nothing wrong with saying, do you know what? I'm 3 stone overweight. I don't want to be 3 stone overweight. I want to get healthier. I want to improve my confidence. I want to change the way I look. And as long as that's navigated in a healthy way, I absolutely see no problem with that.
Yeah, so that conversation is one of the reasons why I would love to have a full intuitive eating practitioner on the show, because I think that little last point that you made there was very interesting, because it was saying, well, you know what, I accept my body, I accept who I am, but I am 3 stone overweight and I do want to deal with that. And I think if you were to look at that internal conversation from the perspective of someone who rejects diet culture, you would think, well, you only think that you're 3 stone overweight because of diet culture, because right now in the Western world especially, but it's pretty much global, there is one accepted ideal body, and if your body doesn't match up with that, then you feel bad. And the only reason you feel bad is because your body doesn't match up to what society has told you it should do. And society has only done that because of diet culture, which is fueled by, I mean, we could get into what people assume that diet culture is fueled by. It could be through capitalism, because of course we've got a fitness industry that depends on people wanting to change their body shape. It could be argued people like you and I wouldn't have a job if everyone just accepted their body the way it is, and so we have a financial interest in upholding the principles of diet culture, which I think is a bad argument, but it's an argument that could be made, I guess, if you really wanted to view it that way. People will say that you can talk about this in terms of oppression. People who are in really good shape, as we discussed on the last show, tend to have certain things in social situations a little easier than people who aren't in what would be considered to be the culturally accepted body shape. And so people who do have the culturally accepted body shape have a vested interest in maintaining that structure because it enables them to have an easier life and to oppress people that don't have that body shape. I don't agree with either of those arguments, but there are arguments that could be made, and I just think it's such a different way to view the world that it becomes very difficult to even talk about. And yeah, that's why I would like to have someone like that on the show to chat it over.
Do you think we've missed sort of an element of our history with our body? Because the arguments that I've seen is that it's become a very new thing, that we've become overly concerned about our body. But if you went back over the ages and you looked at like Victorian times, like just even go back 50 years, then 100 years or whatever, there was always like gadgets and things that were being sold to help people with their weight. So I've seen old school posters where people have tried to sell like a band, and you stood on this platform and the band went round the back of your hips and it basically wobbled, and it aimed to wobble the fat off your hips. Now, back then, we didn't really have much of an understanding around the body. We weren't able to like really track the metrics. We were able to look at maybe weight back in the day. We were able to look at measurements and clothing size. But because of the advent of data, the advent of technology, tracking, research, we've been able to really understand the body. So diet culture, the fitness industry, the products we sold, the information that we try and learn has accelerated dramatically over the last 30, 40, 50 years because our understanding has accelerated. But back in the day, we could say that the ideal body composition, like even back in like flipping Roman times, Greek times, you know, my history isn't great, the sculptures were always of physical specimens looking lean, athletic, strong, often competing against other people, fighting dragons, you know, like it was always painted in a way that this is something that you would want to aspire to, that strong, powerful, able people were physically able, they had a bit more muscle mass, they were leaner. So what I'm trying to get at here is diet culture as recent as people claim it is? Or is it just that it's just been magnified so much with social media, the advent of technology? Because there's loads of things that used to be sold to people back in the day to help weight loss.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, I think what you brought up there about the idea of like Greek sculptures is very interesting. Like the Greek sculptures, if you look at any of the sculptures of men, obviously men were usually very athletic, very lean. An interesting part of that, though, is they generally had very small genitals.
Yeah, what is that?
That was a fashionable thing. If a statue had large genitals, it was like gaudy and improper. And if you looked at female statues, they would pretty much match. I mean, you look at like the Venus de Milo, despite the fact she hasn't got arms or a head, she matches up largely to what would be considered to be, at the minute, the culturally accepted ideal. Now, you can, however, look a little bit further back. So if I get this name wrong and someone's like an art student or something, I apologize. But I believe one of the oldest models of a female body that we've got is called like the Venus of Willendorf or Willendorf. I don't know which way you pronounce it. But it's a Paleolithic statue from like about 25,000 years ago or something. and she would be considered to be overweight nowadays. And that's like the oldest model that we've got of a human, which is interesting because back in those times, it was probably incredibly rare to be overweight. Like most people just wouldn't have enough food. So that was idealized. And I don't know whether this is true or not, but I have heard that in certain points in history, overweight people were idealized and considered to be attractive because it was a sign of prosperity. So that is an interesting argument to say that potentially there is a certain degree of cultural influence over what is considered to be the ideal body shape. But going back to what the paper that I discussed in the last podcast, and I haven't got the paper in front of me, so you'll have to go back to that one if you want the citation. Sorry. There does seem to be a cross-cultural preference for a certain body shape, at least as far as men are concerned in women, which doesn't seem to be informed by culture. It seems to be something that's evolved, and there's an evolutionary reason why that's the case. So it is interesting if you do look back at art that the theoretical ideal body's changed. Now, I'll caveat that all by saying we don't know why this Venus thing was made. Like that wasn't necessarily the ideal body shape. Like we've got, for example, the statue of the Jolly Buddha, who's a big fat guy, and we don't know necessarily that that image is there because that is what is assumed to be the ideal body shape. Like there are other reasons why that could be looked upon. Obviously, if you are overweight, it signals that you're eating to be happy. You are a large person. He's always shown to be laughing. So yeah, it gets a bit complicated. And I think that's part of what I do agree with in this whole discussion about diet culture, in that one of the major tenets of it is that a lot of people are making themselves incredibly unhappy by being dissatisfied with their body shape. And the Jolly Buddha is an example of one of the cultural symbols that's always suggested that actually there are other ways to be happy than being out of an ideal body shape. And if people can start to take in the message that, you know what, diet culture, if we're going to agree that that's a term, tells you that you are incomplete, you're not correct, there's something wrong with you if you don't match up to the culturally accepted body shape. But one of the things that the Healthy at Any Size movement suggests is that actually there are a lot of other aspects to health, and physical health is one of them, of course, but psychological, social health, all of these kinds of things also matter. And I guess one of the big things about rejecting diet culture is by just emphasizing those and de-emphasizing the physical side of things.
So an interesting thing for me that I don't know how many people really sort of ground themselves with so many arguments that we have in health and fitness these days, and especially with this kind of weight argument in diet culture, is that we just live in a really different world now. Like we live in a really obesogenic environment. Food availability is profound. Cheap food is often highly calorific. A lot of people are working extremely sedentary jobs. Compare that to 50 years ago, a lot of people were working quite active jobs. There was more labourers, there was more farmers, there was more people working in factories, doing physical things that, you genuinely got home at 6 o'clock at the end of the day and you were knackered through sheer physical work. There was not that much food. The family had a budget. The budget was stuck to. Some people only had meat at the weekends because they couldn't afford it. It was expensive. Like the world that we live in is completely different. And I don't want people to lose sight of the fact that that is what we're dealing with. Like we're struggling to get people just to do like 10,000 steps every day, where back in the day it was probably normal that you maybe did 25,000 steps. We're struggling to get people to make a different choice over, some quick, convenient snack food that's highly calorific in a petrol station when they're traveling, instead planning and taking care of their health. So the reality is, where we live right now, it's where we're at, and it's probably only going to intensify. In ways, it's going to get better. Industries, governments, companies are becoming more aware of employee well-being. People are given more time to look after their health. People are engaging more in healthy activities. Whereas this stuff 50 years ago was just done. Like we didn't really need to think about the gym because almost like life was a bit of a gym session. But we don't live like that anymore. So for me, we do have to accept that and work with how we live now.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'd love to get clarified, because as Jenny highlighted, says one of the parts of intuitive eating that I struggle with, though, is some practitioners stating your weight or the size you are right now is what your body naturally wants to be. And I want to know exactly what's meant by that, because if we go back 1,000 years in our development, people weren't overweight. If we go back 3,000 years, we haven't evolved much in 3,000 years, but 3,000 years ago, most people weren't overweight. God, if we go back 12,000 years to before the agricultural revolution, when everyone was essentially still hunter-gatherers. In fact, if you just go to Papua New Guinea now, and there's still tribes living there that are relatively untouched by Western society, or modern society, not necessarily just Western. People there have dramatically different body shapes to what we have now. Yes, some of them are larger, some of them are smaller, and there's some natural variation between people, but ain't nobody walking around 50 stone in the middle of the Papua New Guinean jungle. And so when you're saying it's the weight that it wants to be now, surely that is, in that case, the weight that your body wants to be now, given the obesogenic environment that, as you just mentioned, that we're living in. So if you take someone who has the genetic potential, I think I mentioned this in the last podcast, but to my knowledge, there's been around 600 different genes that have been associated with an increase in your risk of obesity. They'll control things like appetite regulation, impulse control, etc. Then that's all further informed by childhood development, your personal environment. But if you've got someone who's got all of those genes and they're living in the jungle in Papua New Guinea, they're not going to end up overweight. If you were to dump them in the middle of London, they would potentially end up being more overweight because of the change in environment. But if we were to then say, because of that, well, in that case, that person's body wants to be the weight that it ends up being when you've dumped them in London, well, you have to then accept that it only is actually doing that because of the environment they're in. And your environment is something you can change. That's something that you do have some level of control over. And so I don't accept the argument that the weight that you are, the size you are right now, is what your body naturally wants to be, because there's nothing natural about the environment we're in. You may be eating an amount that your body naturally wants to eat, but the food choices you make will then dictate the size that you end up being. Your body doesn't naturally want to sit down for 8 hours a day at a desk. So yeah, there's nothing natural about that. And so I'd like to have that clarified, because it's definitely an argument that I've seen a lot of people make. That you should just accept what your body, it is what it is. Wanting to lose weight is a bad thing because it causes you to have negative self-thoughts, which I agree are bad. But if losing weight is something, basically what I'm trying to get at here is when people are saying that weight loss is impossible because this is what your body wants to be, therefore you shouldn't lose weight, it's categorically wrong. Because a lot of people struggle to lose weight, or because a lot of people who lose weight put it back on when it's researched, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's impossible to do. A lot of people fail to do a lot of things because they approach it in the wrong way. And I don't think that there is enough. I don't think that the idea that weight loss is impossible is evidence-based, just because there is a lot of evidence to suggest that a lot of people find weight loss difficult.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what, at this point in the podcast, I'm gonna read the other question that we got in, because I think it actually sort of ties in a comment that I was about to make on kind of, I suppose, our mindset around our body. Someone else wrote into the show called Katie. I'll read it out and we can spitball off the back of that. Hey Ben, I was listening to your podcast 459 about intuitive eating, body positivity and evolutionary biology. Firstly, really love the show. It was really interesting. Views from within the industry, and the idea that body positivity argues against that diet culture is something I see daily on social media, and I think because people often forget their journey. For me personally right now, through a change of diet, it has to be a drastic one. It comes from my body and health, as at the age of 30, my body is showing more and more signs of gluten intolerance. On retrospect, I suppose my body had these signs on a smaller scale in my 20s and teens, but I was always able to recover from it much quicker. I'm now finding myself feeling awful for days, or for a feeling of failure, without planning and making better choices. The reason I wanted to share this is because the idea of intuitive eating for me is the goal that I have been chasing for the past 10 years, but my goalposts keep moving. Things have prevented me in the past, and in all honesty, I gave up, injuries, had emotional challenges, etc. I'll admit I failed to keep going on occasion through my own laziness or self-pity, but I'm now listening more and more to my body and focusing less on my shape. It's more on how I feel, and I am starting to understand the difference. Yes, I have 25 pounds I want to shift as I've lost focus over the last couple of years, and yes, on my dad's side I'm predisposed, I guess, to a bigger size. Although on my mum's side they're all stick things, so I'm not sure I can claim genetics on this one. But in all honesty, never step back to consider how my chaotic schedule, lack of sleep, stress, and what I now understand to be intolerances were impacting on me so negatively. And then when you don't see results, you give up, and then you're back to square one. So what's my point here? I swear there is one. It's taken me 30 years, or if you like, 3 long-term relationship breakdowns, financial struggles, juggling further education with multiple jobs, and working a job to help others with their mental health to finally reach a stage in life that I can give myself time to properly start the journey towards intuitive eating. What I believe should be the end goal, but will only come in time, not overnight. This idea of the two standards actually upsets me more because I don't feel I fit into either. Yes, I am body positive, but I have witnessed firsthand the impacts of underweight and overweight on people's bodies, and I refuse to see either as a positive after losing people to the health issues related to both. Both the diet culture I've also witnessed, and it is just as damaging as it leaves this mental impression of people that we are never enough, and we deserve to be happy. I feel both sides lose sight on the biggest thing in life, and it is the lack of health culture and understanding as a whole that's an issue. By this I mean people need to be aware just because someone is bigger or smaller to the norm of health doesn't mean they can't outlift or outrun you. Health is in how we feel and what our bodies achieve through that. Body shapes do vary, but I think we need to set a very simple standard of health for people to understand, as simple as being able to walk without gasping for air or being able to carry items with ease, so getting your shopping from the car without feeling defeated. Finally, finances of being able to afford a healthy option in the supermarket and making unprocessed foods as appealing and financially accessible. I don't know exactly how to start this or if our society could make such a shift, but I think our education needs to be stripped back because we only learn from the basics. Stop assuming people know how to intuitively eat healthily. They don't. I have clients who think Percy pigs are one of their 5 a day, or need to be shamed into being skinny and promote simple changes and the benefits. For me, I know it will take a few years still, and at first I need to properly learn the basics and build. It will probably see calorie counting, it will definitely see items being cut from my diet, but through my understanding of my body and the basics, I'll get there. I refuse to be part of either culture though, so I'll just start on my own and be health positive. Sorry for such the ramble, but I couldn't shut up. Apologies if this has no relevance. So
I love all that.
The reason I wanted to read that question at that point in time is one of the things that I really don't like to see happen online is that we essentially accept things are the way that they are, in terms of it taking away us becoming empowered to make changes. So I said that yes, we need to accept the world that we live in today is the world that we live in, but that is a constant. The thing that can change is us within that world. And part of diet culture, part of body positivity says, just accept, for who you are, the weight that you are, all of that kind of stuff. And for me, that doesn't empower change. That doesn't allow someone to stand up and say, yeah, actually, today is the day that I go out for a run, or today is the day that I challenge the way that I think. And the thing that I don't know if other people noticed on this, I don't know how much Tom feels was in this narrative from Katie, but I believe that in Katie's narrative, in her question, she puts up an awful lot of mental roadblocks to allow herself to achieve more with her body and mind. There was always like an issue why I felt Katie couldn't overcome something, there was always a partial reason to say, oh, maybe I won't do that today, or actually, I've got a bit of a history of that, so that's why it holds me back. And this is why one of my favourite books is Extreme Ownership. It's an ethos that I try and teach my clients when I coach them. I want us to own our bodies. I want us to own our problems. I want us to own the situations that we're in, however shit it might feel at the time, because if we don't own it, we can't take control. And if we can't take control, then we can't make progress. And I want Katie to maybe read back her email and think, actually, am I disempowering myself? Am I saying to myself that I can't achieve this because of X, Y, and Z reason? And is that actually a fact? Does the data point to that? Katie at the end of her email said, it's probably going to take me a couple of years. Well, it will if you decide that. It could take a shorter amount of time if you decide that. If you start to move around the pieces in your life that will allow you to do that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why I described in the last podcast that healthy at any size and stuff seems almost to me like an overcorrection. Like, yes, historically there has been this idea that overweight people are just overweight because they're lazy and because they choose to eat too much, and therefore the cure to that is to stop being lazy and to choose to eat less. And the data is pretty goddamn strong that just doesn't work. But the answer to that is not to say, well, in that case, just accept your body the way that it is, just accept that the size you are now is the size that your body wants to be, and you should eat intuitively, you should just enjoy food, and if you don't lose weight, then that's fine if a person is overweight. I don't think that's the answer. And me saying that doesn't necessarily mean that I believe that, well, in that case, there is one body ideal and everyone should aim for this one body ideal, and if you don't aim for this one body ideal, you're a bad person. I think you can accept, as Katie mentioned in that email, that there's variation between bodies, and a healthy person doesn't necessarily look the same as the next healthy person, and someone who is carrying a little bit of extra weight or a little bit less weight can be perfectly healthy. But I think that doesn't necessarily need to be conflated with, well, in that case, it seems like a false dichotomy. It seems like either you fall on the side of everyone should be this particular body ideal, or nobody should look to change their body because you're only trying to change your body to get to a certain body ideal. Like, I think you can improve the situation that you're in and improve your health and feel better. I mean, one of the things that the whole healthy at any size movement, and, well, intuitive eating specifically, puts forward is you should eat food that makes you feel good. And I think to do that, this is why I wrote a blog that was saying that intuitive eating isn't intuitive. You need to learn what foods make you feel good. I mean, you said there, Ben, that you were obese when you were younger and you eventually lost weight, and I'm guessing you feel better now than you did before. And I would also imagine that eating a chip sandwich with a meal every day also made you feel good. And I think that there's a difference between short-term and long-term, and some amount of nutritional restraint and some amount of mindfulness around food, and not just eating what your body craves and accepting that, well, I'll just eat whatever I want and then what will be will be. I think that needs to be learned, and I think you do need to spend a bit of time becoming educated and taking some control and taking ownership over what you're doing and where you want to get to.
Ultimately, if you don't know, you don't know, and that is why education is super important. When I work with clients and I challenge them on their nutrition, I try and improve their nutrition to make them realise how good they could feel, because everyone lives with a certain level of norm every day. So you might get up tomorrow and you might feel okay. You're a bit tired, bit achy, bit meh. And that might be your norm. That might, for you, be how you feel when you feel good. And then when you feel crap, you genuinely ate quite a bit, you're pretty tired, you can't concentrate. So that's a bad day for you. But when we engage with health and fitness and we realise how good we can feel, the norm changes and it's like, oh, this is how good I can feel. And that's what got me into the fitness industry. I felt tired, overweight, not in a very good place, got really healthy, and I was like, shit, this is how good you can feel. This is how energized you can be. And that leads into positive action in many areas of your life. If you feel good and feel energized, you're more inclined to exercise, you're more inclined to do extra things in your life because you've got the energy. So that's why it's good to challenge these things, to try different things, to eat a bit differently, to train a bit differently, to see where there can be marginal benefits, and then you build on that when you see kind of a positive outcome.
Yeah, and I would imagine you don't eat like a stereotypical magazine nutritionist that activates their almonds and eats kale at every meal either in order to feel good. Like, this is not us saying that you've got to eat like a wellness blogger.
Mm-hmm. I activate them, then I pray for them, then we do a little ceremony, and then I eat them.
Yeah, there just seems to be no nuance in the conversation. Like, it seems to be, you sit on one side, you have to be this acceptable body size, or you have to reject the idea that there is any improvement that someone can make in their body shape. And I think that sitting in the middle, like Katie does here, and just focus on health is a perfectly reasonable place to be. And that doesn't mean, again, that you have to be some anally retentive person with orthorexia. Like, there is a difference between thinking that health is something that's worth striving for and becoming obsessive with every food choice and becoming an over-exerciser. I don't think anyone's promoting that. Although, well, no, I don't think most people are promoting that. There are definitely some bloggers and some wellness people that deserve a slap in the face. But again, there's not two camps here.
I think another reason this whole narrative doesn't really ring home for me is I'm someone in my life that really values growth, and I really value change. I love learning, I love being able to challenge myself, I love being able to see what my body is capable of. And if someone sat there and just went, oh, just accept what it is, just kind of live your life, just kind of enjoy things, but actually I get a huge amount of pleasure and enjoyment from growing, from being challenged. And sometimes that's a little bit hard. Like, not every element of growth is a fun old roller coaster ride. Challenging yourself is quite often painful. You have to go through certain processes that feel uncomfortable. And I don't want people to not be able to view their body as something that can constantly evolve and grow and experience new things. Because I think that's one of the beautiful benefits of the fitness industry. You think about someone that walks into the gym for the first time and doesn't believe that they can, run a kilometre, and then their personal trainer helps them run a kilometre, and then they're like, wow, didn't think I could do that. Why don't we try 2 kilometres tomorrow? And that's how someone starts and ends up being an everyday athlete, by just constantly being able to challenge themselves and growing as a person. I just think that's a beautiful thing, and I don't want people to miss out on that.
No, and I think that's actually a really interesting way to view this. And one of the things that I've noticed in the healthy at any size movement is the individuals who promote healthy at any size, the individuals that promote intuitive eating and whatnot, they sit at a certain place politically, shall we say. And that place that they sit politically tends to be opposed strongly, often, to a place that someone like Jordan Peterson would sit politically. Do you agree that that's, well, yep. Specifically Jordan Peterson, not someone like him, specifically is who I'm thinking of.
Yep.
Now, if you look at Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, I think if you're the type of person that agrees with the message in that book, you will not be the type of person that would agree with intuitive eating. And I think this is, again, another area where, much like when we did the podcast on the difference between people who follow a vegan diet and people who follow a non-vegan diet, I think there's probably a significant personality difference, because I fall into the group of people who believe that political views tend to be personality driven, and a lot of that's genetic. I don't know genetic, but it's not something over which you have immediate control. I think there's a difference between the people who would be attracted to intuitive eating and a difference between the people who would be attracted to what you just said, which is where it's okay to challenge yourself, to grow, to be uncomfortable, to suffer almost through something that's very difficult, because it's going to be worth it in the end. Because I think in order to get to a stage where you are now, where I am now, where we've got a healthy relationship with food, we've got a healthy relationship with our bodies, we've got a healthy relationship with exercise, and we are viewing life now from the point of view of a healthy person who can grow and can go and focus on other things and go and live our lives. Like, that took a long time to get to, that took a lot of work to get to, and I think one of the messages in Jordan Peterson's book and Jordan Peterson's writings, one of the big ones is that you should pick up the heaviest load that you can carry and work with it. And it's almost as if the people who sit on the other side of this, on the healthy at any size, on the intuitive eating, I'm not saying that they're babying people, because I don't think that they're thinking, oh, well, you should just give up. I think they're the type of person that thinks actually that you shouldn't do that. Like, you should live for immediate enjoyment. And if you're suffering right now, then that is a problem, rather than if you're suffering right now, will that eventually pay off? And I think they're almost two very different ways to view the world. You could almost look at it like the people who value significantly the delayed reward thing. So, you know, that famous marshmallow test. Like, are you the type of person that can sit and look at a marshmallow and wait 2 hours to be given 2 marshmallows, or do you just want to eat the 1 marshmallow now? It's almost like the delayed gratification thing is one of the things that separates the personality types that will sit on either side of this argument.
I'm definitely the person that could look at a marshmallow all fucking week and have a pile of them at the end.
Yeah.
And it's purely because it's a practice skill, and part of that practice skill for me probably evolved when I was younger and I was in a military school, and I had routine sort of drummed into me, and in the moment you absolutely hate it. You absolutely hate having to do things on time and, you know, polish your shoes and all that shit. But when it got to the end of the week and you look back on your week, you're like, actually, I was really productive this week. I got all my homework done. I did X amount of sport. I did this. I did that. And then that made me really value a routine. So it's only in these moments of reflection and practicing a bit of delayed gratification and changing how you kind of respond to your environment and what needs to be done in your environment that you're then able to see the benefits of it. So you do very much have to kind of practice it for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sitting here and accusing people who follow healthy at any size of being basically lazy and just living like gluttons. Like, I don't think that's the case. This is not a fully formed thought, because it's something that I've just started to think of as you were talking about the last thing that you said. But I would be very interested to have a look at the Venn diagram of people who follow intuitive eating, people who don't agree with intuitive eating, and people who agree with Jordan Peterson. I think that will be a very interesting graph to plot and see where the overlap is, because I would imagine that there would be a significantly larger amount of people who would agree with a Jordan Peterson style worldview and philosophy. Now, that's not me saying that someone's right or someone's wrong. I'm just saying that there's multiple different ways to view the world. There's multiple different ways to lead your life.
Yeah.
And I think.
So if I was to sum up...
your personality, to bring this home, I think your personality informs your politics, and I think your personality also informs the way that you view the world. And I think that there is a difference between the individuals whose personalities would draw them to both not healthy at any size and Jordan Peterson, and the opposite.
So if I was to sum up how people are then navigating these messages online, I think people need to spend a bit more time going into and understanding the perspectives and the messages and the background and the history that these people have. So someone that is very anti-diet culture, very pro-intuitive eating, has probably got a background of a lot of dietary and physical suffering that is self-imposed as a result of diet culture. And like we said on the last podcast, they've overcorrected and they're now like, love your body, body positivity, because they've almost had to get to that place to overcorrect where they're at. And if you don't go into and understand all the nuances of their journey and how they've got there, on the front end of it, you're just going to see those kind of messages. And if I was to draw a parallel on an industry that's different to ours, but this person's probably highly well known, in the business world, there's a guy called Gary Vaynerchuk, very famous. Lots of people follow him online. He's got lots of amazing videos. And I quite often get into conversations with people around business, and quite often he comes up and people say, oh, I disagree with Gary Vaynerchuk. He's all about like hustle, 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 work, 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 like do this, do that. And I'm like, he is on the front end. But if you go back a couple of layers, he's basically saying, if you want something bad enough, do the fucking work. Like, that's his message. It's like, you can't get to the end of the week and bitch and moan when you've only put a couple of hours in a day and you've done a bit of this and you've done a bit of that. That's not his message. He's basically saying if you want something, work for it. But equally, once you go through a couple of layers, he's like, if you're happy with your life and things are good and family's good and you're fit and you're healthy, then don't change anything. It's all good. But if you want to get somewhere, then this is how you put in the work. And again, that's not people sort of fully understanding where Gary's come from, what his journey is, and all the different layers of his message. And for me, that's the best parallel that I can kind of draw on that people might know from the social media space. So again, the people that are talking about intuitive eating and stuff, go into their message. Why have they come to that position? And how do you relate to that person?
Yeah, it's not just that side as well. Like, if you were to look at someone such as Ben or myself, what is our message? Because yes, we disagree with healthy at any size, but I don't want to speak for Ben, but me personally, I believe that you should practice a significant amount of body acceptance and body positivity but the reason that I do that is for pragmatic reasons. If you don't do that, you're not going to want to improve your health and you're not going to want to improve your life. One of the things I wrote in a blog or an email or something recently was, if you don't practice body positivity while you are also simultaneously trying to lose weight, then what you're trying to do is you're trying to suffer through something that's difficult in order to improve something that you don't like. And that's just not going to work. Like, it just won't. Like, if you have a house and you hate where the house is and you hate the house, and then you're about to go and spend 15 grand doing renovations, you're just going to stop doing the renovations because it's going to be shit, because you don't want to live there anyway. Similarly, like, we both completely agree with the idea from the intuitive eating side of things that people who are trying to lose weight, gain muscle, do whatever, should give themselves unconditional permission to eat whatever they want. Like, there is no reason at all that any food should be off limits, and that stretches to foods that take you over your calorie requirement for the day, foods that take you over your macronutrient requirement for the day. Like, if you're dieting right now and you've worked out that somewhere in the region of 17 to 1800 calories is going to be a calorie deficit for you, and then you're sat in the evening and you really want to have a Chinese takeaway, you have unconditional permission to eat that Chinese takeaway that takes you over your calorie requirement. The difference is, people in the healthy at any size movement will say that you should do that because your body wants to be the weight that it is, and therefore if you eat that Chinese and it maintains the body weight that it is, then that's fine because that's the way you should be. People who sit on mine and Ben's side of the argument would say, well, it's okay that if you're sat there and you eat far too much today to be in a calorie deficit, because over the course of the next 12 months, that is where the difference is going to be made. The sum total of the decisions that you make over the next 12 months will dictate the body composition that you have after those 12 months, not this immediate meal now. So you've got unconditional permission to eat whatever you want, but if you do that every day, you have to accept that the consequences of your decision is that you will not achieve the goal that you wanted to have achieved in a year. And that's fine. That's not a moral failing on yourself. You're not a lazy person. You're not a bad person. But if you set a goal and you do things that take you away from that goal, then you will not achieve the goal. And you just have to accept that that's the case, and that's fine. And I think that's one of the big differences between these two movements. The side that we are sitting on are saying you can do whatever you want, but it's useful to set a goal and to generally orient your decisions and orient your behaviors towards the achievement of that goal. The other side of this argument is saying that you should generally do the things that you enjoy doing, but they don't have that goal at the end. And possibly, I don't know, that could be because if you set a goal, there is a philosophy that suggests that if you set a goal, then what you're saying is that I will be happy when I've achieved that goal, which is just like saying I will not be happy until I've achieved that goal, and therefore you shouldn't set goals. And that is a perfectly reasonable philosophy because it makes logical sense. I just don't agree with it. For me, if I don't have a goal and I don't have something that I'm working towards, I don't feel like I'm enjoying myself because I'm not doing anything productive. I'm not working towards something. And I think, again, that's just a place where the two sides will differ. And I think this is why it's really important when you're looking at these messages to, as Ben says, dig into what people are actually saying. Because if your view of the health and fitness industry is douchebags on Instagram that show pictures of their abs and then post pictures of their ridiculous diet food that no one actually enjoys, and then they're actively fat shaming people and stuff. And then you come across the intuitive eating world, which is saying that actually you should practice body positivity and it's okay if you're a little bit overweight and blah 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 blah. Then you'll put yourself into this box of saying, right, okay, then I'm against diet culture because everything that is not what I'm doing now is bad and it will cause eating disorders. But actually, if you dig into the messages of the people who are not following the intuitive eating, healthy any size movement, they're not necessarily representing the strawman argument that has been put up by the people who are on that side.
Couldn't agree more, dude. Summed up beautifully. I think we successfully navigated a few more rabbit holes today.
I hope so. I felt like I rambled a bit, but I hope so.
Well, that's
and again, I want people to write in. I want people to continue this conversation, and maybe we don't answer them in a podcast. Maybe we do. But I think, there's a lot more talking to be had here because as it stands right now, I think the conversation's way too, as everything, this almost feels like it's a particularly trite statement, but I think everything's too polarized right now. I think there's too much of this is diet culture, this is anti-diet culture, but there is stuff that is in the middle. And just because anti-diet culture people will define the stuff that's in the middle as also being diet culture, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. And that should be discussed.
Definitely. The reason why we need to do podcasts like this, and it's now been 50 minutes since we started, is there's a lot of context here. There's a lot of things to explore. There's a lot of research. There's a lot of opinion. There's a lot of experience. There's a lot of backstory. There's a lot of emotion involved. Everyone has a different experience of the world. Everyone has a different view of the world. Tom comes from a different experience than me. Tom has a different experience through understanding the research as I do. There's lots of different things, and once we start to amalgamate all of that together, we hopefully allow you to formulate your own opinion and actions off the back of it, rather than just sitting here saying we believe in this and you can either decide to join our camp or join someone else's camp. That doesn't really help anyone. And thank you very much, Jenny, for picking that up. She said she follows our messages because we feel that we're pretty objective and we just try and break things down and we reference the research where possible. So I'm glad that's coming across, and thank you both to Katie and Jenny who wrote in on the show for today's show.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's always really cool when people write. People always apologise for writing really long emails, but really long emails give us context. And it's also quite cool that people feel able to open up with certain things that might be a little bit more personal, like their problems with their weight loss and stuff like that. Like, it's cool, and we do appreciate it. It can be often difficult for people to discuss those things, so thank you for people who do.
Definitely. So if you would like to comment, pass your opinion over to us as a result of this show, please email bencoomber@gmail.com, write into the show, give us your opinion. Again, we'll keep evolving this conversation if there is evolution to be had. We're going to try and secure a guest for the show so they can hopefully come on and throw some curveballs at us, and we can have a little dance around this topic. All I would say is that we've talked a lot about education and empowerment today. If you would like to become more educated and empowered about food and nutrition, then go to the website btn.academy and sign up for our free nutrition course, and actually just learn and engage with us. That's where Tom spends most of his time in the BTN Academy, helping our students, reading through research and dissecting and navigating this nutrition journey for us all. And yeah, that's it. That's it for the show.
That's it for the show. Thanks again for listening, everyone. I do appreciate it.
Cool. So if you want to write in, bencoomber@gmail.com. If you want free nutrition course, btn.academy. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next Q&A show. All that leaves me to say is go and have an awesome day. Goodbye.